everyone. Welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. As there has been a recent surge in violent terrorist activities in Pakistan, especially in the province of Khyber Pukhtunkhwa. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has categorically said this particular menace would be dealt with iron hands. He has also said that no militant group would be allowed for the state to be bowed down in front of it. And he said that the government would also address the external facilitation of the terrorists. The president and prime minister at the same time have paid tributes to the martyrs who have laid down their lives in countering this menace of terrorism. And they also saluted the armed forces for their successful operation at the CTD center in Banu. According to DG ISPR, 25 terrorists were killed, 3 were arrested, and 7 they surrendered themselves to the security forces. And during this operation, around 3 security officials also embraced martyrdom. The Prime Minister at the same time acknowledged that it was important to enhance the efficiency and the capacity of the counter-terrorism departments of the provincial governments, and he has also offered facilitation to the Khyber Pukhtunkhwa province in particular to restructure its counter-terrorism department. Earlier, the US State Department extended unconditional support to Pakistan in its battle against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Also, the United Nations chief, Mr. Antonio Guterres, also called upon the Afghan Taliban to end all terror activities on their soil which pose a threat to Pakistan. Now, what is required to develop a collective thinking in order to counter and curb this menace of terrorism, and what needs to be done in order to revive the National Action Plan? Also, what sort of facilitation the federal government can provide to the provincial governments to restructure and revamp their counter-terrorism departments, and how Pakistan can benefit from this offer by the US of its unconditional support in order to deal with the threat of the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. What sort of a role the United Nations can play in this regard, and what regional implications lie ahead, and what happens to be the responsibility of the regional countries in order to counter this spillover effects after the international troops have withdrawn from Afghanistan. And to look into all these aspects, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Auqaab Malik. He's expert foreign affairs. Dr. Malik, thank you very much for your time, for being on Views on News. We really appreciate that. And at the same time, on Skype, we are being joined by Brigadier retired Mahmood Shah. He's the senior analyst. Brigadier Shah, thank you very much for your time, for being on Views on News. We really appreciate your time. Now, let me begin the discussion with you, Brigadier Shah. As the Prime Minister has said that the state is going to deal with this menace with iron hands, and the state is not going to bow down to any militant group, and for that, collective thinking is required to counter terrorism. So how do you think this particular collective thinking could be developed in the country?
I think, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, first thing is that we need to have a clear laid-down policy towards Afghanistan or the Afghanistan present government. And we must not have any sort of differences on these aspects, as whether we should have negotiations with these terrorists or not. I think that is out of question. And here somehow the provincial government was holding negotiations with the terrorists, which has backfired, and this has also encouraged the terrorists to strike inside Pakistan. I think we need to have negotiations with the Afghan government, and we need to make it clear to them that you have promised in the Doha agreement and otherwise that Afghanistan style will not be used against any other country. So they better do that instead of giving statements and telling Pakistan that yes, we are prepared to do that, but you first have negotiation with these terrorists. This should not have been agreed to, and I think this is what they told Chinese also. And they told Central Asian Republics, these 3 countries, but they all refused to have negotiations. In our case, we started negotiation. I don't know why under what impression and things like this. So that is one aspect that the federal government should lead in this and have negotiation with the Afghan government and find out what are their weaknesses, what are their problems, what do they want to do. They should be told that as America has offered Pakistan this help immediately, you can see that international forces are ready to intervene again into this region. And this will be unfortunate if we do that. And Taliban must be told that you must ensure, otherwise the international forces will come and they will sort of place pressure on Pakistan to accept their help or whatever they are saying. So I think what is that? The second is that we have to have a clear-cut policy that along the border we will not allow any infiltration of these terrorists into Pakistan. Afghanistan can help by removing these terrorists from those places to the interior of Afghanistan. We should also discuss with them that what is the possibility of these people being repatriated to Pakistan between the two governments. And we should place these people before our courts. And the courts can decide if there is enough evidence, they can give them some punishment, and if there is no evidence, they can let them go. So that is how this issue is going to be resolved, that either Afghanistan is going to hand them over to Pakistan, or the other is that they can move them away from their border to the interior so that they cannot attack inside Pakistan. But meanwhile, if they are not prepared to do anything like this, then this is our responsibility to look after our borders and see that these people do not come inside, and whenever they do, proper military action should be taken against them. We have FC Frontier Corps all along the border, and I think that is a good enough force, and if there is a need, it can be patched up again. It can be increased or decreased wherever it is required. So that is where the second aspect which the Prime Minister has pointed out, the CTD or the police for that matter, needs to be beefed up.
Brigadier Shah, beg your pardon for the interruption. I'll come to this particular second aspect, which Prime Minister has also highlighted. When we talk about negotiating with the Afghan Taliban, so do you think Pakistani authorities on the two fronts, there should be a realization among the Afghan Taliban and their ranks that during when there were international troops in Afghanistan, it was Pakistani authorities which had been facilitating and had always been advocating for a peaceful and a stable Afghanistan, and they had been facilitating the Afghan peace and reconciliation process. Now it's time for the Afghan Taliban to return that sort of a favor that Pakistani authorities had been doing over the number of years. And also, after the international troops withdrawal, it was the Afghan Taliban which urged Pakistani authorities to have negotiations with the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban. Shouldn't there be a realization after the negotiation from Pakistani authorities was given a chance, this is what the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is started to do again?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that their suggestion, notwithstanding that they said you have a negotiation, why did we decide to have negotiation? That's the central point, and that is where we made a wrong decision. And I think at that time, and even till very recently, there is no policy at the federal level, and there was no policy to lead or guide the provincial government. And the provincial government was doing what it thought. And for example, for that matter, it is the PTI government which is here, and they always have a sort of wrong perception of the Taliban in Afghanistan. We shouldn't have any misgivings about the Taliban or whatever they can do or they would be doing. We should be very clear. We have been dealing with them. We have been helping them. We have been sort of their sympathizer, but yet we cannot allow our country to go that way. Whatever this small force of Taliban, we make very big issue out of it. I think Pakistan is a regular country with regular armed forces, and it is not Afghanistan by any standard. And we should negotiate with the Afghan government as to how can they help in this. I made two suggestions. One is moving them away from the border, and the second is letting them come to Pakistan through a negotiated process so that they can be placed before our judiciary, before our courts, for whatever charges are there against them, because they are criminal as far as we are concerned. And therefore, we should not have any soft corner or, for that matter, any further discussion on this aspect. In our country, if you ask here the provincial government, they have different view of the whole thing. Whereas people know about it, that these views about Taliban are not true, and we should be careful. So that's the aspect of at the federal level, what policy we should follow. And the second is, of course, many small things which probably we're going to discuss later as to how can the CCTV be strengthened, or police, or for FC for that matter.
Right. Dr. Malik, why do you think the Afghan Taliban haven't been able to fulfill their promise that they made in the Doha peace deal, in particular that the Afghan soil wouldn't be allowed to be used against any other country, and what needs to be done in order to impress upon them that they should fulfill that promise?
Well, let's look at it from the start here. With respect to the what the Brigadier has said, I kind of disagree with quite a bit of what he said, primarily because I don't think it's phased or phrased in reality. On the ground, realities are that Taliban and the Afghan Taliban are one and the same. Essentially, Taliban helped the Taliban get into power, and throughout this whole struggle for the last 20 years with the Americans and other international forces, Taliban was fundamental to, as a backbone and the spine of fighters and training in hand with the Taliban and supporting them throughout. So for the Taliban to give up Taliban is just, it's not going to happen. To say that they're going to hand over Taliban fighters to Pakistani forces, and we know what's going to happen to them here, through the judiciary or anything like this, it's just not a non-starter. It's unfortunate, but it is a non-starter. To negotiate with an entity that is based and mandated and philosophically absolutely opposed to the Constitution of Pakistan, which feels that the Constitution of Pakistan is an anathema, completely against the whole emphasis of what it is, the whole being of what Taliban is. How can they negotiate with us? In fact, 10 years ago to this month, I was helping and as a consultant with NACTA, National Counterterrorism Authority, writing in the process of counterterrorism assessment and national strategy on counterterrorism. That's what we were composing and writing. And at that time, what was happening was that government at that time was in appeasement talks with the Taliban, Taliban. And I always said, this is not going to happen, because every single talk up till that point, every single peace treaty, so-called peace treaty up to that point, failed because it was unworkable, because the two opposing sides could not negotiate with each other. They were there to consolidate themselves, regroup themselves, rebuild themselves, and take time away where there was no offensive action by Pakistan armed forces. And as a result, they got time to recoup and then re-attack, and that's what they did consistently every single time. Now they're in a peaceful environment in Afghanistan, meaning they're not being attacked by Pakistani forces. We can't go across to the other side of the border. And as a result, they're regrouping, re-attacking, and they've got their own plans ahead. And to think that we're going to be able to negotiate with them, but after so many years and about 100,000 people dead, I think it's laughable, and it's dishonest to the memories of those people in the military, the civilians that have died, and the law enforcement that have died in saving this country against that threat. I think
that is what Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also said, that we are going to deal with this threat with iron hand, and the state is not going to bow down to any militant group when it comes to the rise in terrorist activities by the banned Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But of course, the Afghan Taliban are governing Afghanistan, a whole country. They had negotiations with this, the United States of America struck the Doha peace deal. So at some point, the authorities have to negotiate with them to impress upon that, look, this is the promise that you made in that agreement, and that is what you're required to fulfill.
That's absolutely true. So here we go again. Hina Ribani went to Afghanistan in a jet, landed in the airport in Kabul, got out without any headgear, which is good. I support that. The emancipation of women is very important. What did they just do in the last couple of days? They abrogated any idea of female education at the higher education level. They want no participation of females in that. So let's look at it on the switch side here. So, I'm making an example. You can't trust them in that respect. The fact of the matter is negotiations is important. They made promises that will not have any foreign forces or local forces attacking from their soil into any other country, neighboring country, especially Pakistan, because we face so much of that. So I think it comes down to hard measures then. We're not talking about foreign forces coming back in from all around the world. They're not going to. That's not going to happen. But we may have support forces supporting us here in counterterrorism operations, which may mean intervention into Afghanistan, chasing them as and when we need to, because that country has not been recognized as an international entity yet. And as a result, do these borders exist? Does that country really exist yet in the international spectrum? And I think, given that we're being attacked, we would have the world on our side. And I think it's very important for the world to recognize that we're faced with this existential threat also that can destabilize Pakistan. Nobody wants Pakistan to be destabilized. Even India does not want us to be destabilized.
Right, Brigadier Shah, your point is well taken, Dr. Malik. So, Brigadier Shah, when it comes to the US announcement of unconditional support to deal with this threat of TTP, what sort of a help can be expected, and what should ideally be done by the US when Pakistan had been for years the frontline ally on war on terror?
I think that first let me talk about this, that these people have been helping Afghan Taliban. We are very aware of what sort of help. Their contribution to Afghanistan Taliban was less than salt in a sort of thing. They are a very small number. I mean, now, my brother just now said 100,000 people. They are 4,000 people, and for their maximum number, along with women and children, rose to 9,000. And this list is available at GHQ, and it was placed before me. And when they asked my sort of opinion about all this thing, they want to be forgiven and they want to come back. I said they can come anytime that they like, because the border is not so much sealed that they can't come. But when they come back, the local population is going to rise against them and they are going to kill them. And they want government of Pakistan protection for that matter. That is why they want to negotiate. They say, we want to come. Otherwise, tell them you can come back the way you went. You can come back also. Go to your area and you will find out what people are going to do to you. So this is one aspect. The second question that you asked about the Americans have always been wanting to ask, once they were getting out of Afghanistan, if Pakistan can give best. In fact, they checked up otherwise on ground that whether the government of Pakistan will be able to give some sort of basis to America so that they can leave some force behind and continue looking over Afghanistan after the withdrawal also. We refused, and in fact they did not ask because they knew the opinion which they were seeking here and there. I was aware of those efforts, and they were doing it from Kabul. They were still there. So now when they ask Pakistan, we will help, they want to say they would like to have some bases in probably Balochistan or some places, so that they can continue watching the things in Afghanistan. Because what they are worried that Afghanistan will remain a cradle for terrorist activities, and some terrorists will get trained there, and then they can strike. They haven't struck up till now. So I think these are things we must make the Taliban to understand that the international forces are continuously looking at them. And if you are unable to do this, don't think that you are doing this to Pakistan. Pakistan can look after itself against this threat. Don't worry, we can do so. We just want that so that people are not killed. They should be told that you either go to Pakistan or you shift them into interior of Afghanistan. And nothing like this we accept. Since they have been helping Taliban Afghanistan, so the Afghan Taliban are now going to say, you now unleash into Pakistan. Pakistan is not Afghanistan. And these people, whatever they are, they are saying that we don't want to, we don't recognize this constitution and so on and so forth. The whole thing is that we should ask, who are you? What is your strength? Pakistan is a country of 200 million people. And what is your strength? 4,000? 5,000? You think you are going to turn around the state according to your wishes? So they need to be told. Otherwise, you saw yesterday the result of that operation. We have very capable armed forces. And we are not Americans who would go away. We don't have to go anywhere. We are going to stay here. And they should be made to understand that either you follow the international rules, otherwise you will be targeted. That the Afghan government will come under criticism. So far, nobody is recognizing them. Even Pakistan has not recognized them. And you know, Pakistan recognition is a lot more for them, because that is where their ambassador comes and he sits in Islamabad and starts lecturing the whole world. And thanks God that hasn't happened up till now. And I think it's not going to happen very soon either. So Afghan Taliban must understand the dynamics of the situation, and this is for their own good. As far as we are concerned, this is our responsibility to protect our borders. This is our responsibility to protect the areas, and whatever sacrifices are needed, we are going to give those sacrifices. And we are not
Brigadier Shah, your point is well taken. We are joined by another participant in the show on the phone line, Mr. Asif Durrani, former ambassador. Mr. Durrani, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. So, starting the discussion. You're always welcome. Mr. Durrani, so there is a clear-cut and categorical announcement by Prime Minister that the state is going to deal with this terror threat with iron hands, and we need to develop a collective thinking, and a national action plan is also required. So what do you think is required to develop that national thinking, the collective thinking in order to deal with this particular threat?
I think it's very simple. It's very simple. You have to give condition to the TTP to surrender. There is no compromise. They are a non-state actor. The coercive power is always with the government of the day. There is no other way anywhere in the world. And non-state actors cannot be allowed to take up arms. So they have to surrender without doubt, because we should have no doubt in the country. And as regards negotiations, there is no need to negotiate. The negotiation is to surrender. I think enough has been done, and I think we have suffered for that because of this dilly-dallying on the part of some of the officials, that they wanted to give these TTP people a chance, or at the behest of the Afghan Taliban, that let's negotiate. And I have my great concerns about the behavior of the Afghan Taliban, because they have supported and given shelter to the TTP. They are responsible for their behavior as long as they are on their soil. And if they plan and take shelter on their soil and perpetrate their actions against our security forces, Afghan government is responsible.
So
There
Mr.
should
Durrani,
be no
if the Afghan
ambiguity
government,
on that count as well. I think this CTD Banu operation, salute to our contingent which cleared those terrorists, and I think this policy should continue without fail. And we have to protect our borders. And if the Taliban try to pull down the fences, I think we should take a serious exception to that. There shouldn't be any compromise. Yes, we should have a normal trade relationship. And in the past 1 year, the trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan has increased, and the balance of trade has been in Afghanistan's favor. And then so far, the Taliban have been, I think, I have no problem as far as the emerging situation between Pakistan and Afghanistan is concerned. I don't think there is cause for alarm because of the Chaman incident, because that's a local incident, and the Taliban had apologized for that. But by and large, the Taliban behavior, we should have no trust what they do. We should not try to be their apologists. We should not try to patronize them, and we should not speak on their behalf whatsoever. No one, because they are a sovereign country. Let them do whatever they want to do. Whatever they have done about the women, they will be responsible. We are not responsible. They have to, because they are not an island in this world as far as the Islamic world is concerned. They are not an authority on Islam, and they cannot dictate Islam. And they are, in fact, creating a horrible model of Islam by these tactics. In fact, they are not helping the cause of Islam at all. They are harming Islam. So they have to, in fact, solve their searches. Yes.
So, Mr. Durrani, if the Afghan Taliban continue to allow their soil to be used against Pakistan, and the banned groups like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan keep operating using the Afghan soil, and the reservations and the serious concerns by the Pakistani authorities have already been conveyed to them, and they continue to be conveyed to them right now as well. And if it doesn't stop in future, so how the Afghan Taliban in particular could be impressed upon that you made a promise in the Doha peace deal, this is what you have to fulfill, and what other options remain at the hand of Pakistani authorities in order to deal with that scenario, if they don't fulfill that promise in the future as well, how they can be held accountable?
Listen, we shouldn't go for the military option. If there are some attacks and TTP uses the territory, we have to deal with them on the spot. That is the remedy, immediate remedy. Secondly, we can put several squeezes on Afghanistan, and trade is the best because they are a landlocked country. And I'm sure Iran is also aware of the situation, and they are also sensitive to that because that can spill over to them. And then, yes, there is a caveat, because a squeeze on Taliban government would mean more poverty in Afghanistan. We have to be aware of that. And more poverty means that people would be forced to flee their homes. And where would they go? They would definitely push for Pakistan. So this is a complex situation. We have to handle it delicately. But at the same time, since Taliban are isolated, so I think they have to do more rather than Pakistan. We have the options available. That's not that we don't have the options available, but I think we should use it selectively. Yes.
Right, Mr. Asif Durrani, your point is well taken. Former ambassador joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much for being on Views on News. Really appreciate your time. Dr. Malik, when we talk about this offer of unconditional support by the US State Department to Pakistan in order to counter and deal with that threat of banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, what sort of help can be expected in what forms? Should there be a technology transfer from the US side towards Pakistan in order to deal with this threat, and more training to the human resource concerned?
I think when it says unconditional support, there's always conditions attached to everything. So as even the Brigadier said, I did agree with some of his points. You've got to be very careful about how you negotiate with anybody who wants to play a part in whatever situation you're in. I think we should take it on face value, though, as well, and see and explore exactly what they can provide and what we need and what the deficiencies are that we have, and negotiate on that respect. It is a form of negotiation because it's another state asking to help us, because they have their own needs. They don't want militants coming into Pakistan and destabilizing it again. I think it's very important for the US to understand that as well. And people in the US, in the Congress and the Senate, who have their own independent opinions about this rather than just the administration. I think we need to appreciate also that there are failings in our system here. We talk about the National Action Plan and reviving it, etc. Well, it should never have been disbanded in the first place. Once you start become complacent about your so-called successes in fighting militancy and extremism and terrorism, what happens, that's when it rears its ugly head again. And so we have to recognize that now that the Taliban are in Afghanistan, the perception amongst most of these militants, in ISIS as well, Tehrik-e-Taliban, who have worked together, by the way, there is an understanding that they're emboldened, that they've taken back Afghanistan against the largest superpower to ever have existed in humanity. So that has emboldened them, lionized them to think that they can do something against Pakistan. They should not think that way, obviously. But we can't interfere in their mindset because that's just the way they think. That's what militancy is. So in that respect, I think we need to negotiate with the United States in what way we can benefit. In our benefit, we're working hand in glove together, I think, in this respect. And as far as Taliban is concerned, they need to recognize that they're already sidelined in the world community. They're seen, Afghanistan, unfortunately, for the last 43 years, has been seen as a black hole. Taliban has brought certain degree of peace and security, certain degree, but not completely, because there are constant bomb attacks around the country against its own rule. That they are still seen as a black hole, that the Taliban has not impinged in a positive way on the global community about what it actually is. In fact, it has abrogated its own promises in many different ways. And that's why I brought up the female education aspect. So I think when we look at this, we have something in common with the US and other European countries and other countries around the world, the Russians, the Chinese, Central Asian countries as well. That surround, I think it's more important that we recognize, as the ambassador said, Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan even, and Uzbekistan, and the responsibilities they have towards their own people, not to allow militancy to be impinged upon themselves. And militants are firing into those countries. Just recently, last few days, firing into Tajikistan, for example. This is where we can negotiate with other countries to foment a certain regional understanding in how to deal with Afghanistan, which has not occurred at this moment in time because we're impacted uniformly now, I think. And I think Pakistan needs to realize that this old resource that we had with the Taliban and understanding may be coming to an end, because the Taliban itself now is perceived within itself as a national government. It has its own large territory, its own national interests, which may be contrary to Pakistan's interests, and we need to realize that it may no longer be a friend, as some people in this country may have thought so. So I think we need to rationalize that it could even become an enemy. And in that respect, as any realist thought would tell you, is that we have to negotiate with it on these terms, that we must set barriers and red lines and severe red line punishments if they cross those.
Is there any responsibility of the United States of America? Because whenever there is an agreement signed, it's between certain parties. So there were two parties in the Doha peace deal, one the Afghan Taliban and other the US. Now, it's according to that agreement that they made a promise that Afghan soil wouldn't be allowed to be used against the United States of America, its allies, or any other countries. So how can the US play its part in making the other party to fulfill that particular clause of the agreement?
Well, the thing about this is that after 20 years of fighting against the United States and pushing them out, the US has its own interests as far as the global competition and the hegemony that it has right now and the world order. So that's the foremost aspect of what their focus is right now. Afghanistan no longer is a main focus. So we have to realize that as well. And they did make a promise. The US left. But what can the US do against a country that is staunchly against anything that the West holds dear? And how can the US impinge itself upon the Afghan Taliban apart from not recognizing them? What sanctions can they play? It's completely sanctioned in any case. So as a result, I think it comes down to the regional countries, more importantly, because we're the ones who will dictate what happens. But as the ambassador says, this is a very delicate situation. The people in Afghanistan are suffering immensely. Most of the people did not want this to happen. Most of the people are in dire need of help from the outside world. So we must also consider their humanitarian needs. And this is where intervention, if it occurs, not on the ground, I think it's all about sidelining Taliban even more because they want international recognition. This is not the way to get international recognition.
Right. Brigadier Shah, the international recognition, the Afghan Taliban, the interim Afghan government so desperately wants to be recognized by the major world powers, especially its recognition at the United Nations. We saw a statement by the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, also that they are actively engaged with the Afghan Taliban so that their soil is not used against, in particular, against Pakistan. Now, when it comes to their requirement of the Afghan Taliban of being recognized internationally, what sort of role do you think the United Nations can play after this particular active engagement which the United Nations Secretary General has mentioned?
I think they can help a lot Afghans if they go towards the recognition or even short of recognition. There are certain aspects, certain embargoes which are against Afghanistan presently. Their money is in certain banks, about 9 billion or so. If they release that money, it will be of use to Afghanistan. Now, that's a different issue. When we think of how to deal with Afghanistan, we know downward that which are the groups within the Afghan Taliban. It is the Haqqani group which mainly is behind this terrorism in Pakistan, mainly the Haqqani group. And Haqqani groups are from the tribe known as Zadran. We know where Zadran live in Pakistan. And I think if we start squeezing those people who belong to Zadran tribe, who belong to Haqqani, and have a soft sort of thing with the other Taliban groups within them, because they are the ones who are showing no interest towards, they don't give any opinion, why should we annoy Pakistan government. But it is the Zadran or it is the Haqqanis who is mainly, he is the minister in the cabinet, interior minister, I think. He is so Sirajuddin Haqqani. So I think we can always put our pressures where it is required and convey to them that we are not going to be led away in this fashion. You do your complete your international sort of guarantees that you have given. Otherwise, you are going to destabilize the whole region, which includes, and I totally agree with the previous speaker who said we, these Central Asian republics ourselves, or for that matter, Russia and Iran, if possible, can get together, and even China can get together and work out a policy as to why Afghanistan is not behaving. And for sort of going down that lane, we have many more things up our sleeves. For example, I told you these are Zadran, and I know where they live, from Islamabad up to Murree and Barakau, all the Zadrans are living. And if you start saying that you move to Afghanistan, it's going to put a lot of pressures on Afghanistan Taliban. And we should recognize that who amongst these groups, presently, you know, like in the previous Taliban regime, Mullah Umar had a very central role, and his word was the last word that he spoke. And whenever we went and discussed with him certain things, he would give decision, and everybody will listen to that. Unfortunately, presently, that central leadership is not there. And these Taliban groups are on their own, whatever suits them, are putting it into the Afghan government policies. And for example, I told you the Haqqanis are mostly responsible for this Banu incident or whatever is happening on North Waziristan, because that is where their area is. So I think if we start dealing with it in a little more detailed way, we're going to protect ourselves far easier than what people think. Yes.
Right. Dr. Malik, is there any role do you think that the UN can play in this regard?
I think the UN would like to play a large role in peacekeeping or peace building within that community. It is the remit and the mandate of the UN to do this, obviously to negotiate between countries and allow them to coexist with each other. And this is an anomaly in world affairs, by the way, Afghanistan is. A government that is not recognized by any single country in the world, irrespective, even though it's consolidated control throughout the country, not recognized because of what it's doing. I've given talks previously when Taliban initially came in about the need for incentivized approach. The fact of the matter is Afghanistan needs certain resources, needs certain facilities, needs certain recognition. And this is how we incentivize an approach, and that we make them commit. Forget about the Doha talks. That is done. I don't think we can really take that into account anymore because the Taliban is in control, and they feel actually that they've taken control on their own basis rather than fighting with anybody. Yeah? So I think they didn't go according to Doha talks in the first place. So they kind of abrogated it. But in this respect, to be able to help Afghanistan, and I don't think it's this stage yet that other countries will recognize the Taliban, but there is a step-by-step process that can be outlined to that point if they are willing to accept their part in the international community to be part of it. And the international community, the whole of the world, indicates that they have to act and behave in a certain way. You can't just go into your cave and hide there and do your abuses or whatever you want and expect the world to just sit there and wait, because in the end, something's going to go wrong, and as it is happening here.
Right. Dr. Malik, your point is well taken. This is a very important point that has been highlighted by Prime Minister also, increasing the efficiency and the capacity of the provincial governments and their counter-terrorism departments, and especially when we talk about the Khyber Pukhtunkhwa government, he has also extended the facilitation that could be provided to CT. Now, what sort of facilitation do you think these provinces require, especially when we talk about the Khyber Pukhtunkhwa government?
I think one of the things that we should have done from the beginning, this is a law enforcement, essentially a law enforcement remit. And the military is involved because the military is more cohesive. It's a national body in that respect. It can carry out operations as and when need to. But counterterrorism is essentially a law enforcement remit. And as a result, there needs to be more coordination between law enforcement bodies. And this should have occurred for the last many years, but that was where the problem was, that each provincial government wanted to deal with things in its own way, and that disconnected each other from the different operations that were taking place, or the necessity to hand and share information. This is why, for example, NACTA was created in the first place, to be a body in which it would be able to resource out information by understanding and collating information from all bodies, intelligence bodies, and different parts of the country, the law enforcement agencies, and be able to have an overview of exactly what is necessary and make plans accordingly. And that's where the problem lies. The problem lies in the fact that that was politicized from the beginning. When Rahman Malik was there, at the beginning as Interior Minister, he wanted to take it into the Interior, for example, and politicize this action.
A better coordination in that regard
I
is
think
required.
Words have been said that they want to create a new Homeland Security type organization, but the fact of the matter is, NACTA was already there, set up for this particular purpose altogether. The fact of the matter is that because it was initially politicized at the beginning, you stopped it from growing in the first place. And then it was reduced in capacity as a result.
So
and
there is a
couldn't become
requirement
what
of
it should have been.
reviving it, and a better coordination is required.
I think the same organization, the structure is already there.
Unfortunately, we're short of time. I'll have to cut you down over here, and we'll have to end the show over here. Dr. Auqaab Malik, expert foreign affairs, thank you very much for joining in the studio. We really appreciate your time. On Skype, we were joined by Brigadier Retired Mahmood Shah, senior analyst. Brigadier Shah, thank you very much for your time, for being on Views on News. Also, we really appreciate your time. And that is all from today's Views on News. Until the next one, take good care of yourselves.